A very warm welcome to all of you. This is Business Today, your weekly business roundup brought to you exclusively on Channel I. And today is 23rd of August 2017. They say most great people achieve their greatest success just one step beyond their greatest failure. So keep in mind that failure is not an option to exit till you succeed. And with that in mind, we are ready to start our show, and let's move on to Business Personalities segment. Yes, the business personality joining us today is heading a very, very important entity in our financial system. And this is the entity that is responsible for all interbank payments and settlements. So let's connect with the introduction to welcome our guest.
Well-known ICT industry veteran Chano da Silva took reins as the General Manager Chief Executive Officer of LankaClear in November 2015. With over 22 years of experience encompassing a spectrum of industries, having served in several leading multinationals and local organizations, Mr. Da Silva brings with him a wealth of knowledge, expertise, and business acumen to drive operations and growth of LankaClear, and take the organization to the next elevation, with the rollout of several groundbreaking payment solutions planned during the next few years. Mr. Da Silva went down in history by becoming Sri Lanka's first ever webmaster, with the development of Sri Lanka's first commercial website Lanka.net 1994. And he was also the engineer responsible for the establishment of the first ever dedicated internet connection in Sri Lanka back in 1995. Some of the major projects implemented under his leadership include the first online newspaper in the South Asia region, Daily News, in 1995, first radio station online, TNL Radio, in 1996, first ever Wi-Fi network in the country, international IP telephony network, state-of-the-art NOC, F3 standard earth station, network security infrastructure, and first prepaid internet card system, internet in a box, etc. He was also a member of the local language workgroup of Sri Lanka, and contributed immensely towards enabling people to use technology in local languages. He also played a pivotal role in ensuring that a language interface pack was built in Sinhala and Tamil for Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Office in 2007. Apart from his notable contribution towards the country's ICT infrastructure development, Mr. Da Silva is also known for his prowess in giving leadership and spearheading growth at organizations that he was previously attached to. Prior to joining LankaClear, he headed the Sri Lankan and Maldivian operations of Singapore-based ICT consultancy, Thakral One, as the Senior Vice President. He was orchestral in introducing IBM's software universe to Sri Lanka and developing IBM's software business during his tenure as the DGM software group of IBM Sri Lanka. Mr. Da Silva also served as the Director, Enterprise Business and Public Sector at Microsoft Sri Lanka, where he led the company through an unprecedented growth. His outstanding achievements were acknowledged numerous times by Microsoft, where he was singled out for Microsoft Gold Club Excellence Award in 2011 for exceptional performance, the Microsoft Share Fighter Champion in 2012 for winning against competition, and Microsoft Sri Lanka secured the Best Enterprise Team in South Asia for 3 consecutive years under his leadership. He has held several CXO portfolios during his career, including the position of CEO at several local IT companies earlier in his career. An old boy of Royal College Colombo, Mr. Da Silva obtained his BSc Honours and MSc in Electrical and Computer Engineering from the State University of New York, USA, specialized in data communication. He also holds an MBA from the Postgraduate Institute of Management Sri Lanka, and the distinguished membership at the IEEE USA, Tau Beta Pi USA, Eta Kappa Nu USA, and Golden Key USA for academic excellence. He has also been a senior consultant to some of the leading companies and has shared his experience and expertise in the areas of e-commerce, e-security and technology trends at numerous forums as a keynote speaker. He had also been attached to PIM, Colombo University, SLIIT, and Open University of Sri Lanka as a lecturer for their MBA degree programs on numerous instances during his illustrious career.
Yes, he is Mr. Channa De Silva, and he is the General Manager, Chief Executive Officer of LankaClear. A very good evening to you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here.
Right, so LankaClear is an extremely important entity in our financial system. So first of all, can you talk about its primary objective and the responsibilities of this unit?
Yeah, LankaClear, the primary responsibility is to ensure financial inclusivity in the country. Okay. In other words, using technology to take financial services all over the country and to also entire population. So to do this at a faster pace as well as at a lower cost, okay. and even to the rural most population. So primary objective is basically taking financial services across the country.
Right, so this entity was formed in the year 2002. Up until then this was handled by Central Bank of Sri Lanka. So what was the requirement to set this up as a separate entity?
Yeah, initially, I mean, the name of the company LankaClear came from check clearing. Mm-hmm. The check clearing function, interbank check clearing function, was initially performed by Central Bank itself. And then, because Central Bank is a regulator and an entity that sort of sets up the policies, they found it difficult to continue with the operation of check clearance. So what they thought best was to set up a separate entity, but under their regulation, okay, to carry out the same function. And they set up LankaClear as a public-private entity, which is owned by themselves and the banks. So what happened was the operation was transferred to LankaClear, and the operations commenced in 2002.
Right. So there's also a question as to who owns this organization. Is it a state-owned or a privately owned entity? Can you talk about the ownership structure of this organization?
Yeah, actually, it's one of the best structures I have studied in the country. Mm. It's one of the better public-private partnerships that have been established. Okay. So LankaClear is owned by 47% of the LankaClear shares owned by the government, mainly Central Bank, Bank of Ceylon and People's Bank. They own 47% of shares, and rest of the 53% of the shares are owned by all commercial banks. So the company is regulated by Central Bank and owned by the banks, and the services are provided to the bank. So it's in a unique position. The customers as well as the shareholders are the same.
Yes.
So in that sense, we are completely regulated by Central Bank and also provided services to a regulated industry, which is financial sector.
Right. At the same time, as you are the only organization in Sri Lanka responsible for all interbank payments and settlements, you have absolutely no competition in the market. So in such a situation, how do you re-engineer your processes in order to enhance your service standards?
Yeah, I mean, the way we look at it is service is number one. Yeah. So when you look at service as the highest priority, we cannot bring the service levels down. So in order to improve our services, it's a continuous process. So we, I mean, a simple example is when we started operations in check clearing, there was a portion which was manual, where a CD has to be brought to the organization. And we have now completely automated it, so providing a better service to the customers. So when I say customers, it's a bit of a...
the owners as well.
Yes. So actually the difference is the services are actually consumed by general public and businesses. Mm-hmm. But they are not our customers. We are providing the services, we are behind the banks, and the service is provided to general public via banks. So in that sense, our service cannot have downtimes. So we maintain highest level of reliability, but what happens is if we are down, the end customer cannot access the service. So in that sense, we are very conscious and we take every effort to make sure that our services are reliable and hopefully it does not go down. We have not had that kind of experiences of systems going down.
Right, so there was a massive system upgrade in 2006 where you came in with a unique solution to clear checks, and with that Sri Lanka became the first in South Asia and second in the world to introduce this solution. Can you talk a little bit about this system upgrade which revolutionized the entire industry?
Yeah, I mean it was primarily to automate the check clearance. Before this system came up, actually a physical check had to travel from bank to bank in the physical mode. So a customer would go to a branch and deposit this check. It had to go to the head office of that bank, it had to come to clearing house, and then it had to go to the customer's bank, the check owner's bank, and then to the branch level and come back after clearing, which took sometimes more than 7 days for a check to get cleared.
Okay.
So people had to deposit a check and wait for more than 7 days for the funds to realize. So now when we automated this, now it's only an image that travels from the branch and backwards. So we were able to improve the service to 1 business day. So if you deposit a check today, within 1 business day, the funds are cleared. So that was the revolutionary step that we took by introducing this system, which was actually only Singapore had implemented prior to Sri Lanka in the whole world.
Great. So at the same time, your vision is to be Asia's most trusted and reliable payment network. How do you hope to achieve this?
Yeah, I mean, it's an ambitious goal. I admit that. But I think it's still achievable because one of the things that we do, we are dealing with people's money. It's not something unimportant. It's very important to, person who actually, so the person has to trust the entity that manages his or her money. So in that sense, we take trust as one of our primary objectives to ensure trust. So in that sense, we take security and other precautions as, one of our fundamental objectives of running the operation. Second one is the reliability. If somebody goes and tries to withdraw money or deposits a check, and if it doesn't go through, the person is left without an option. So if our systems cannot go down. So in that sense, we try to maintain 99 times of reliability. So to ensure that people are not affected by downtimes, and also ensure that all our systems are regulated by the regulator. So it's within the content of the laws of the country, payment laws. There are 2 laws governing Monetary Law Act and the Payments and Settlement Systems Act. And all our systems are approved by the Monetary Board of Sri Lanka. And before any bank or any financial institute connect to us, they have to first obtain central bank approval, that they have the right and the authority and the approval to connect to us. So we ensure end-to-end stability, reliability and security to make sure that people trust and the trust is ensured and also reliability is ensured.
All right, great. And integrity and trust, as you say, are key essential factors when you are in such a vital industry. So can you talk about LankaSign certification service provider setting up this in 2009?
Yes, so LankaSign was set up as the first certificate service provider in the country.
Okay.
Commercially operational certificate service provider in the country. So what it does is basically it issues digital certificates. So when you are sending carrying out electronic transaction, if you send that in what you call clear text, in plain text mode, anybody who interprets in the middle will have access to that information. So for example, if somebody wants to transfer money of 10,000 rupees, somebody can interpret and either make it 100 or 10 million, right? Okay. So if you send that in a clear text where people can intercept and make changes, then it becomes an issue. So what LankaSign does is, it uses digital certificates and it encrypts before actually it leaves customers' either computer or even a mobile phone, so that anybody who interprets the messages cannot make sense out of them. And it's only the intended receiver who can make sense out of them. Yeah. So nobody, unless somebody is able to decrypt, which is, encryption is reversed, which is, I wouldn't say almost impossible, but the risk-wise, it's minimized. So in that sense, LankaSign provides a vital service by issuing digital certificates, which allows all the communications to be secure. And intended receiver would only be able to decrypt it and make sense. And also, all the transactions are digitally signed. So nobody can claim that you are not the one who sent or initiated the transaction when it's digitally signed. And the digital signatures under the Electronic Transaction Act in Sri Lanka are accepted in a court of law as evidence. So in that sense, digital signatures are also valid. So LankaSign is also used to sign as digital signatures and to sign electronic transactions. So almost all the banks and financial institutes use LankaSign certificates to make their channels secure, as well as all their transactions, what we call non-repudiation, which means the authorization and the person cannot deny that he or she is the one who initiated the transaction.
Right. Great. And since we spoke about digitalization, I'll ask this question. And as your name is associated with many firsts, innovative firsts in this industry, as you launched the first commercial website in Sri Lanka, first online newspaper in South Asia, first online radio station in Sri Lanka, and many more. So how do you see this, the scope of online business in Sri Lanka from a perspective of a pioneer?
Yeah, so I mean, it was 22 years ago in 1995 when we introduced internet to Sri Lanka. And the whole of Sri Lanka was connected through a 64 kilobits per second line. So 64 kilobits per second line in current sense is nothing. Even a house line is few MBs when you have ADSL. So in that type of a technical era, we were still able to publish Daily News and Sunday Observer. The servers were located outside Sri Lanka because people who were accessing primarily were outside Sri Lanka, Sri Lankans who are expats, and also TNL radio, we were able to broadcast. So when we started, it was the infrastructure was very primitive. But now, after 22 years, when you look back, actually, even from your mobile phone, you are accessing internet at amazing speeds. And what people use internet for, especially when you look at social media, I mean, what it has done to people's lives, what changes that it has brought to people's life. When we look back, I think we can be proud that we were associated in bringing this to the country, and what it has actually done to, I mean, it has affected the common man. So, I mean, when you look at people, they cannot live without their smartphone. And so in Sri Lanka, the population is close to 22 million, and almost 6 million people have smartphones. So more than 1/4 of the population have smartphones already. And that is actually their everyday life. So they might travel without their wallet, but they will never travel without their phone. So I think technology has become so close to everybody's heart. And I think one of the fundamental things, how that has happened is the internet, I think, which has basically brought technology to people's homes.
Right. With that, I will ask this question. As mobile apps are becoming popular every day, more and more popular every day, what are the initiatives you have taken to support this audience? Yeah,
I mean, actually there are different schools of thought on this. When you look at from the banking sector, banks would like to offer their services on a mobile phone. So they have developed and deployed what you call mobile banking application. When you look at mobile banking applications, you can do a fund transfer, you can pay your utility bills, or you can make a payment to somebody, and maybe you can open a bank account. Those things are automated using mobile banking application. But when you really look at the general public, or you and me, how many banking transactions would you and I do for a month? Probably the number is very limited. 3 or 4 transactions a month. So, but when you look at mobile apps, it serves a different function. Take applications like WhatsApp, Viber, or PickMe or Uber. Those applications actually carries out different functions. So when we look at those applications, those are not payment applications. Those are not banking applications. Those are lifestyle applications. You would use a PickMe or a Uber to go from A to B,
right,
not to make a payment. So people who use Uber or PickMe would use that for having convenience. And when you have convenience, and this mobile app should add more and more convenience to people's lives. So if these apps provide more and more convenience, I mean, for example, one of the fundamental problems people have today is how do you order dinner? Busy life, you order dinner, you have to go. I mean, I'm not talking about the the 5-star hotels or Pizza Huts or whatnot who can actually deliver, but the corner shop where you want to get dinner, you have no option but to travel to that location in traffic and waste 45 minutes to 1 hour and wait till they finish the food and make the payment and come home. But if there is an app where you can just order and somebody like a delivery channel can deliver it to the person's home, by the time you go home the food is delivered, I think that will change people's lives and people will start using. So I think those are the type of applications which are close to people's hearts and also addressing their needs, actual needs of people. I think that is what we really need to strive for, and that is what we feel that people would start using. So those are the type of applications that we need to really drive, and if you can facilitate a payment via their applications, I think people will start using it.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us. We have a whole heap of things to talk with you, but since we are on a constant battle with time, we got to wind up. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Right, with that, we will move on to our regular stock market update, and we have with us Mr. Sharaj Obesekara from Colombo Stock Exchange joining us. Yes, as we bring you regular updates from the Colombo stock market, we hope to extend this conversation further in order to talk about the latest developments. Let's move on to the stock market segment. Yes, so we have with us Mr. Deva Alepola. He is the Executive Director and Deputy Chairman of Equity Stockbrokers joining us today. He is no stranger to us. A very good evening to you.
Good evening, Ms. Anga.
First of all, to start things off, can you talk about the customer sentiment in the market?
If you take the progress in the months of June and July, the market actually took off. If you look at the second quarter of this year, the market actually picked up about 11%. So actually the sentiment has been good in the first 2 months or 1.5 months of the second quarter. Since of late, from this month of August, of course, the market has retreated some of the gains that it had in the early part of the second quarter and throughout the second quarter, but yes, as of current, we've been seeing a little decline right now.
Okay, so foreign investments currently account for about 40 to 50% of the market. So
yes.
We see an increasing trend in the foreign investments. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, if you look at the figures from January 2016, continuously we have been having more than 30%. And if you take an average of about, for 2016, it has been about 40%. And this year, up to month of July, we had about 46% average inflow, total participation of foreigners in the market as far as purchase and sales concerned. So that we see as one of the things is that the Morgan Stanley Capital Markets Index, where the markets were categorized as emerging markets, where Asia, you saw Pakistan getting elevated into the higher category. So there is a reallocation of funds from these markets, especially from the Pakistan moving up, which will impact and benefit to markets like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Vietnam. So that was one of the main reasons we saw, I think, quite a bit of inflow happening in the last 2-3 months. And before that, of course, there was, but it has increased after the reclassification of the Morgan Stanley Index weightages for the markets which we represent.
So any particular reasons you see why the foreign investors are coming into the Colombo market for trading?
So like I said, then when you look at the markets which are available, like I said, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Pakistan, you would find that Sri Lanka is very well, valuations are very low compared to the other markets. So obviously obvious choice for Sri Lanka amongst frontier markets to have an advantage when you compare with Bangladesh and Vietnam. So we see Sri Lanka as an attractive destination. At least the foreigners have seen that, and they are taking advantage of it right now.
Right. So how has the market reacted to this trend?
Well, I think markets very much welcome this move, and it's happening at the right time, because the Sri Lankan market itself, or the investors itself, has not been very it has been very lukewarm. Their response to the entering the Sri Lankan market, as we obviously have our own issues to sort out, and so I think that's basically keeping our investors aware. But having said that, I think we are addressing the issues back home, and sooner than later, hopefully, the macro picture will hopefully improve, so that we can see more foreign Sri Lankan investors coming back into the market.
Right, so it is indeed a good sign to see more foreign investments coming in, but we don't see many locals still active in the market. What do you think are the reasons?
Primarily, obviously, we were moving from issues back home. We know we were downgraded by Fitch, where we were downgraded as a market that was not having problems in our own backyard. But I think that downgrading was reversed early this year, and we were make stable the weightage given to Sri Lanka. So I think, and then also we see there is the donor agencies who have pledged more aid for us to get past the issues we have in payment of debts and investments that we require to do. So I think that is a sign that we are addressing the issue and not putting the issue below the carpet, and then we will suddenly see that we will have to face a much more huge task. So I think the macro picture is getting addressed rather than putting it, like I said, aside, which is a good thing. But maybe that's why the local investors are finding it hard vis-a-vis, you have known the new tax changes that have taken place. All these are affecting the disposable income of the corporates and the individuals. So I would think I think, like in my previous interview here, I mentioned that the next 12 months is going to be hard before it becomes softer.
Right. So how do you see these trends affecting Sri Lanka within the next couple of years?
Yeah, like I said, there's no quick fix for issues what we are confronting with heavy loan payments in the next years, going up to even 2020. So the strategy that Sri Lankan government is trying to address, we think, is see if we can get any whatever funds we could and pay up some of these loans and ease off the future debt payments that we are going to have, which will have an ease on our the funds that the government requires to pay these loans back, and so that they'll have more funds to for investment and other purposes, the projects that we are hoping to have, the port projects, the roads and railway and all these megapolis and all these projects requires funding, So if you have all the funding that you get are going to go to repay loans, there are no funds left to for development as per se. So I think we are taking the corrective steps, and we are in the right direction right now. So of course these take a little time, as I said. So maybe that's what the foreigners see. They take a more longer term view. They see a market or an opportunity, and they take about 2 to 3 years forward view, sometimes even up to a 5-year view. That's something that we have still not seen in the local market. And of course we also see that the institutional investors, the traditional pension funds, the insurance funds, and huge government institutional funds have not been active in the market due to various reasons they have to be addressed. I think that's also hopefully getting addressed. Once those are done and dusted with, I'm sure they will be back in the market, and then we would have a much more vibrant market.
And also in history, the locals have gone through some bad experiences in terms of trading. So what are the security measures right now in the market in order to protect the investors?
Well, like I think I mentioned before as well, there is currently a very, very close wrap the regulators are having on the brokers, and they do have a dialogue. We have a dialogue with them, and there is feedback going back and forth based on monitoring. Like they have a monitoring system, which they got a state-of-the-art surveillance system, which gives you a picture, a dashboard of what's going on, and that helps them to monitor and perhaps prevent rather than precaution before something happens. So I think that has helped, and whatever currently is been very carefully taken care of, and the room for any repetition of that kind of nature is very minimal.
Right. Also in the recent past, we have not seen many IPOs, initial public offerings coming into the market. So are there any initiatives taken to attract privately held companies to list in the market?
Yes, in fact we are, but as you know, the valuations are also low. So when a company wants to list, they also want to get a higher value for their shares. So it's a chicken and egg situation where the issuer wants a higher price to issue and get a higher return on their, they have brought up the company to a level of profitability and stable dividends payments. So they also want to unlock value at a reasonable price, I would say. So when markets are low, we see issuers at a very low level. But answering your second part of the question, whether we are doing anything, well, as investment bankers who are out there, we go out to prospective people who can come into the stock market and make a listing. But yes, I agree that a lot more can be done.
Right. So at the same time, are there any initiatives taken to list large government-owned enterprises?
I think repeatedly the governor has mentioned that they're looking at listing some of the institutes, government institutes. I think we have to look at that, because still quite a bit of the majority of pension insurance business, banking business, if you look at even airlines, hotels, some of them are still, government is holding some of the key institutes of these industries. So I think you can do even in the finance direct investments, they are looking at PPP, private government. So we are not telling the government to totally sell out. Like example I gave before, say Sri Lanka Telecom, government owns still 40% of that institute, and they have government directors in it. But there is a private strategic investor also who has come in and given the expertise and given the capital and given the input as well. And then there's a public shareholding also. So we can use that structure, and we don't need to call it privatize, this term using a privatization. No, we would talk it in terms of listing, getting a listing for government owned enterprises. So I think that way we can perhaps improve the performance of these companies as well as make a more liquid market.
Okay, my final question to you is, can you talk about the global trends very briefly?
Yeah, well, we have seen some of the global shocks. We have seen the US election, we have seen the Brexit, you know, we have seen these issues, but initially I think there is a laid down situation where the markets have reacted negatively sometimes.
Right.
But I think by and large we have been able to overcome, and I think much is gone by, but unless there is a major shock, I don't think much of risk is there in the near term.
Right. So thank you very much, Mr. Alappula, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for calling.
With that, we got to wind up for today. Thank you for being with us. We will see you next week. Take care and good night.